Welcome back, me and more or less, to another edition of Meanderings. A chance for us to have deep conversations, but very much with a lighthearted touch outdoors. So we are in our familiar place with the park behind us. No South Bank today, but we got the park. We got Juan on this side.
Kyron here, other side of the microphone.
And look, today on Meanderings, I want to have a bit of a conversation, not so much on advertising just yet, but more onto
I've got
topic.
thoughts.
You got thoughts on advertising, and we might look into this one, or we might look into the next one. But I want to start off with AHM being lazy. AHM being lazy. So
What?
AHM being lazy.
Okay.
AHM, for those who don't know, is a product, a healthcare product here in Australia, who is owned by Medicare as a product. Sorry, Medibank as a product. AHM is just a healthcare provider.
Oh wait, is this the one that got hacked?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it's you want one in Australia. Now, lazy. I want to say they're being lazy because I can't remember what I updated in the past on the podcast. Although I did mention that they had gotten hacked and the way that they're responding compared to Optus, how they responded.
That's
so
what we talked about.
A couple of things that we talked about there, and look, just overall, man, they're just being so lazy in their ways of responding to the issues that have been happening with people. And I got an email yesterday from them. Now I know a few people who are on AHM as well, so that was a particular healthcare provider, and they haven't received this email. And the email said like, "Hey, oops,
What up?
what up,
boy?
By the way, just so you're informed, your name, address, mobile number, date of birth, thing with password, ID, Medicare number, all lost, all been shared across with like lots of links and being like, if you have a problem with this, you can reach out to the AFP or to somebody else, or we have some, if you're feeling mental pressures because of this, please call our hotline and we'll try to support you through this time." And in my mind, I'm like, man, fuck your support. Just don't let the thing get lost. And I kind of go, man, what the hell? Like, what's going on? And it kind of made me think, the initial investment of probably what would have been the cybersecurity protection or the extra layers of, and it's always a risk basis of, how much do you spend to how protected you are and how operable something is. So I get those differences. But in this one, I kind of go, it seems like they failed the mark. They failed the mark because, for whatever they had spent, they might have spent beforehand to prevent something like this happening. Now that it's happened, it's probably costing them so much. And beyond that costing of so much, it's also, probably putting a bad taste in people's mouths. So there's going to be a point when, not right now, because, favorably, they have stopped charging people extra money, like more money than they were expecting to, but you're still getting charged for their services in essence. And I go, I'm sure at some point, a couple of months from now, it's just going to be like this cliff edge that everyone's going to jump off in terms of people who are signed up with them and to go to somebody else. Perhaps, right? I'm saying perhaps. But I guess it's a call out to me that the laziness of a company, or, putting it back to us, me and Mortalites, as an individual, I think if you get lazy with something, and the more important that thing is that you're going to get lazy with, be prepared for some consequences that are going to be ultimately probably pretty detrimental to the company or to you as an individual. So for me, I look at this and I go, okay, there's probably like all trust has been lost in this company to a certain point. I'm happy staying with them for the time being. And look, I'll be straightforward. I pretty much have private health cover purely as a tax benefit. That's it. So I go, once this period is over where they're not raising more money than another comparable company, as soon as that goes, I'm just going to go somewhere else, because obviously they've already shown that they can't protect that particular bit of information rightly, and while they might become better, I've lost that trust in them. I was going to ask you just whether you've had the level of trust lost in a company or a thing before. That's why I was thinking like advertising, but there's something that you've just come across that either has advertised to you, has been informed, a company, a person, where you've gone, okay, yeah, that action now has lost all trust in that entity. I can see myself like kind of participating in it for a little bit, but it's never going to be a comeback from this.
Well, I mean, the problem for me is I don't buy things.
Yeah.
So I'm struggling to see something like for me. It's always been I see it and then it's like I'm going to try and remember this kind of post-hand. So something like the Volkswagen diesel fiddling diesel, where they were messing with their emissions. They had some software which could detect when it was being measured, like the actual emissions were being measured. So they would like down regulate it to this really like efficient mode, which was not typical of how they would normally drive the car. That sort of thing, that makes me go, as a company, do I want to get a Volkswagen? Like, if they're willing to do that sort of shady shit, what other shady shit are they willing to do, maybe related to something I really care about, like my personal safety? Are there seatbelts made of the correct material, that sort of stuff? So in that sense, I don't think I can't recall ever having a company break my trust and I'm like, oh, never again. It's more just been bad experiences using an actual product and being like, you're just making this hard for me, you're making this difficult, fuck off.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of an equivalent of luckily, we're talking in the crypto world, we both had nothing to do with FTX, nothing invested into that.
I wanted to bring this up,
but it kind of makes me think again, just as a start shifting into that hey, if I was in that circumstance and I go on, oh man, then 100% I would have lost all confidence in that company, that individual, ever again. Like that, there's almost no reconciling that. Almost as much as they can be apologetic and etc. It kind of goes, okay, that's a little bit step too far.
Yeah. Well, once again, apologies. Is he, if he was really wanted to show he was apologetic, he would maybe try and set up a fund of his own personal resources to get back, personal wealth of his into it. So, even if...
Did you hear about what happened with the Bahamas accounts?
I believe they all got frozen, but then some were being allowed to let their own funds get out, which I'm guessing was people who were working in the company.
Yeah, it was basically like just as... And for those at home who might be following this, because I want to make sure that, we do have a lot of people who know about crypto, but perhaps don't. Basically one of the top 5 crypto
second
exchanges.
Or third biggest.
Well, no. 5th if you go in some other places. 2nd if you go by like volume of people. So because OKX and a few others Chinese ones are bigger. But basically a really large one, really large crypto exchange. Unfortunately, lost. They're essentially cross-lateralizing loans with customers' money. Got found out, dumped their
bank run happened.
They
didn't have the
coin
liquidity
that they used to offset like loans and the like was pulled down, which in turn meant a lot of their liquidation got triggered, and so they're basically people are not getting the money out of this exchange. That's it. That's basically it. But yeah, no. So this one was they came out with this thing. So same kind of this thing was like, okay, we're allowing for the short time for people to get their money out, but only if you've got KYC confirmed and you live in the Bahamas. Which someone actually looked it up, and it was basically only people who worked at the company who were able to do that, and beside that, that's it. And so it actually got overturned by a US judge, senior court or something, being like, no, you can't actually do that, and they overturned it. But those few hours, heaps of money got shifted out.
Of course.
So again, all of these things happen, and I kind of go, if you see a lot of that happening, yeah, okay, it's probably a straw too far. I'm probably not going to trust anything else that's going to come out of that particular company on that utilization.
Now, you mentioned laziness before, laziness of AHM. Was this the actual kind of root cause of these problems? Was it that people in these companies they knew they wanted to do this thing, or perhaps, they wanted to do this thing, but it also required some extra back-end work. You need to call these people and make sure this is right, or you needed to hit up these regulators and do this, and they were just too lazy to do it? Or was it something more along the lines of actual kind of malicious intent in terms of, I don't give a fuck, I'm going to do this, I'm going to, spend these people's money, despite what is the kind of actual rules? Was it more, oh, this is a gray area, I'm feeling like a little bit risky, I want to make more money, I've got a bonus coming up? I'm just trying to think, is laziness in these types of situations, is laziness what you would describe as the root cause of it? Or would it be something more related to greed, or one of the other, seven deadly sins. There's greed, there's envy, there's sloth, there's pride. It could be. What sort of ratio do you think is related to these sort of events?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't say any of those in particular, but I would say that it probably underlying it would be the priority that would have befallen that company. So for HM or the parent company of Medibank, it would have been the priority of having the right level of security here is...
As in they're making it simply a bad call. They didn't understand statistics or something. This
whatever may have happened. Yeah. So whatever.
IQ, brain, raw power in the brain of individuals who are making decisions just wasn't up to scratch.
Yeah, or it feels that way. Or at least, look, it might not be, right? We're not obviously in the previous of where they decided to spend their money.
Yeah,
what if they spent it somewhere else to do whatever. However, if someone was to map out like, hey, you created a brand new advertising model or a brand new ad or a brand new app and it looks really cool and shiny, and that's where the money went to instead of, hey, let's protect the underlying processes and baselines and servers. Okay, looking at it now, you'd be like, okay, well, that was a dumb move. Like, that probably should have been, like, absolutely the first most level of security should have been there. Perhaps they did have it just as everyone else has it and they got unlucky. So, if that's the case, okay, woes on them for that perspective. But I think, to me, it feels like there's some level of priority that was done by that company where they prioritized something else over that security that was able to be, the data was able to be uptaken by somebody else coming in maliciously. And the laziness that then comes out is like, okay, well, it feels like a lazy decision. Like what decision was made here that was prioritized over this? What decided that? What eventuated to that? And knowing corporate, I have a feeling that it was like there probably wasn't such a comparison, such an evaluation really done of like, hey, we're spending X amount of money on this to build this new app. We're spending X amount of money in here. And they're making like a logical decision or rationalizing as to why we're doing that over this. I think if you looked into the raw data, it'd be like that voice won out until we did that, and there wasn't a rationalization of why we should have been protecting this in the first place. So, and I've seen this firsthand in workplaces where they didn't spend their money for security. I've been part of programs where that just like it's the second fiddle, and I've also seen off the back of a lot of the cyber hacks that are coming out, companies that are building things which all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's the biggest priority, we need to do like all these things to it. Maybe it's overbalanced to the other side, but it's like, okay, it took that to propel someone. So I go, before that, I think people were being lazy or just not thinking rationally of like, okay, if that happens, what's going to be the problem behind it. So
I think I put a greater weighting on not laziness. I would say there was a small enough. I would say for most of these decisions that they make, and it's not like it's a one decision. It's a series of decisions till it gets up to a point where it all comes out, and we're like, how the fuck did you do this thing? But I'm sympathetic to that. It can be a the sliding scale, the slippery slope argument of, oh, you didn't even, the frog boiling in the water type of deal. But I still feel there would be enough times where a guilty ping of their consciousness happens and they actively squash it down.
For sure.
I feel like that happens enough where it's like, okay, there needs to be repercussions for this. And
yeah, but it's in the sense of it's a risk v value. And when I say laziness, it's a laziness to not inspect that risk.
Yes, correct. So,
value appropriately. So let's just say, take whatever company, and let's say with the cybersecurity. And if you get hacked in this way, let's just say out of a scale of, how fucked are you from like a 1 to 10 if this happens, and you go, okay, well if we were to get hacked and all of our data goes and it gets sold off and then we lose all that, okay, that's 1,000. That's like infinity, right? Now, the percentage of that happening is 1%. That's still a huge number. That's still a huge number. Like, if there's any probability of a very high risk happening, that's a pretty... And like, you see them in like
risk matrix. It should get to the point where you're kind of exhausted of trying to fix it, and it's like, I can't do more.
Yeah, it should just be like the nth degree of things. And so, and if that's what happens, we're conjecturing here, but if that is what, Medibank did, and they still got hacked, okay, then I'll retract my statement of being lazy. However, I'm being polarizing here, as one good supporter of the podcast has said. And to be honest, I'd be like, until I see proof that they weren't being lazy, then to me I go, I've lost faith in that. There's laziness inbound. There's the wrong priorities being met here. I'm going to go somewhere else.
Of course, actions speak greater than words.
So
here's another one that I've been thinking of recently. So I went to a Bitcoin event 2 nights ago, and you have to kind of show portions of yourself that present yourself in a certain way, for example. So, I have a dabbling in the shitcoins, as they say, and on their rules, on their kind of Telegram, it's very clear this is a Bitcoin only event. No talk of shitcoins is kind of tolerated. Like they don't want it, and sure enough, fine. I'm happy to completely agree with that, and I will respect the rules. But it did get me thinking of, like, even just presenting things on the podcast, and this will lead to that advertising thing I wanted to bring up, was there's a Cardano event happening here in Brisbane, and I saw Pete was so Pete from the Learn Cardano podcast, had him on quite a while ago. He was just had an open call. If you want to present something, fill in this Google Docs form and you can be a presenter on the day. And as you know, one of my goals has been to become more active in, not present, but to become more active in the communities that I'm joining. And I was thinking, well, look, there's nothing I know about Cardano particularly other than HOSKY. HOSKY is probably the only thing I know kind of better than most people, because I've spent a lot of time in that arena, and I kind of get it in a way. And I was thinking, should I do a presentation? And what would the presentation be? Nothing to do with price. It would all be about, related to kind of ethics, the kind of paradox of the shitcoin, which presents itself as a shitcoin, and it's going to rug pull, and that kind of balance between fun / trying to make sure people are financially responsible. And I think that's an interesting mix that's worthy of talking of, which is why I talk about it. But as I was analyzing this more, I was like, look, if I was to do that, I think it would cross a boundary point for me, which is now it kind of feels like I'm shilling it. And the problem is, if I didn't have any of it, I'd be totally fine with that. But I do have a bunch of it, because it's also kind of like I'm putting my money where my mouth is. Like I'm participating in the system. And so I think about that a bit in terms of, is it even ethical for me to talk about it on the podcast, because me talking about it is kind of a shilling in a way. What is the difference between me and then someone who's on the very far end of the scale, like BitBoy, who shills the fuck out of these random ass shit tokens, and his kind of argument is, look, the audience demands it. I'm very popular.
He gets paid for it too.
He gets paid for it, and there is a demand from my audience for this. If I don't fill up into this gap, someone else will. Once again, I'm not as sympathetic towards that as the others, but I can see the rational reasoning as to why someone would do that. So for me, I was like, no, presenting at this thing would be too much for me. That's a boundary step too far. But then going on to the advertising, it's also like, so FTX has collapsed, basically. It looks like there's not going to be any sort of bailout, which I think is a healthy thing.
Well, there can't be any sort of bailout because it isn't secure, it isn't regulated.
Correct. Well, like, it's not like daddy government's going to come in
it can't, unless it's regulated, you can't get a bailout.
Yes. So the that happens, and obviously there's been a lot of drama the last couple of days, and so I'm hand up, guilty as anyone. Yep. It's exciting. It's like,
it is exciting.
Oh my god, what's happening here? Like you get into it, and so I jumped into way more. I've stopped watching a couple of the handstanding podcasts for a couple of days, because I'm like, I want to consume all of this stuff related to what's going on.
Yep.
And I see the other side of why the advertising model is fucked, which is when I've ever talked about it on here, it's always looking at myself. It's going to make me sense of myself. I'm not going to talk honestly and openly about these certain things. The incentives that could drive me to create content would also, I'm more going to be like more focused down a certain path, which is why, I've talked about HOSKY before, and then there's been huge gaps where I haven't even brought it up because nothing interesting is going on, and there's no
need to shill it.
There's no financial interest, nothing's happening, and I hope that if I started to see it actually become an actual, what I would say, the shitcoin metrics in terms of pump and dump sort of behavior, that's when I would start calling it out and being like, no, this is fucked. And so I was watching a couple of shows, in particular Bankless, because they get on people I like Eric Voorhees, and they had on it's like Up Only, if you know, have you heard of that before? Uponly.tv. So it's another very kind of like crypto podcast, and it's this guy called Kobe. You might have heard of him.
I've heard of Kobe, yeah.
So it's him and another dude. And both the Bankless show and Up Only had sponsors from FTX before, and Celsius, and BlockFi, or not, some of them separately, but I believe Up Only was sponsored directly by FTX, the US subsidiary, I believe, so not as bad as the international one, which is the one that really fucked up.
Well, the US one also can't withdraw now, so...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
So yeah, see, that's interesting one. Sam actually posted something on Twitter being like, by the way, it's all fine. Yeah. They also got paused.
Yes,
so.
and once again, look at the source where it's coming from. Do you trust that source? Obviously not. So the thing was that they were almost trying to justify themselves, and this is where I was going like, oh, you got to remember, it's a two-sided relationship. So yes, if I'm accepting advertising money, normally you're thinking, you're more at a risk because the advertisers can cut you off whenever, if you say a bad word or a naughty thing, and bam, your whole life, your income, your lifestyle is now in tattered and ruins just because maybe you said or whatever. But this was the opposite side where it was like, oh, here's some seemingly genuine people who are now having to justify themselves, and like I was shouting at my screen, I was like, you stupid fucks. Their like level of embarrassment, the effect of them having these sponsors on them was me going, oh, here's the other side of the coin, which is your reputation is now getting tied up as well because you've said all of these good things about this company, which is now coming out and has been like absolutely fucked. Now, for the value for value model, you could also say, okay, well, what if one day it turns out that Pedar, the slab, is a psychotic psychopath?
Or he was actually a killer on the loose.
Could be. Right. It could be. He's displayed a lot of disturbing travel behavior recently, which makes me very suspicious. But once again, this is where it's like I need to do more thoughts and research into how this is different. But I feel there's a very big difference between those two cases. And so once again, just like with advertising, like it's just it doesn't work. it works, but I feel you're selling your soul. Anyway, that's rant over. I think thoughts are needed. I'll work on this.
More thoughts are needed because let's say you're a random company in Michigan, and you want to advertise to someone in Australia. You want to get someone in Australia to buy your product.
Yep.
I don't know if there's yet a I get that the existing model's bad. What's the alternative for them to do that? There isn't an alternative. Yep. You have to kind of advertise, and advertising can be, you have a website that showcases the need for you to maybe buy
entity
something.
to entity sort of makes sense to me. So if you're
that does make sense.
If you're that company in Michigan, so you're a company and you want to advertise, maybe it gets screwed up when it's like company to a single individual type deal, or something like that. Whereas so when it's like BMX or one of the pharmaceutical companies, which is like the big money advertising, when they start advertising on a show like Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan or something like, you know, of that caliber and high level of viewership, that's maybe when it's particularly obvious how kind of fucked it is. And so if it was more like they are advertising on a network perhaps, or on a medium, much like they can advertise on Facebook or something like that, I'm more sympathetic towards that. And I don't see the advertising model is not going away anytime soon. And value for value, 100% doesn't work in every case. I understand that, but it's these sorts of scenarios where I'm just, I don't know if I can't tolerate it. I listen to that show, and I see even I was watching another one. So this was Robert Breedlove's What Is Money, and Corey Clipstein was on there, and so I was Peter had recommended this, so I was like, all right, I'm going to check this out. And you know, he's getting midway through, and then he says like the first word or something, and then it cuts to a screen. and it's like, I want to tell you about blah blah blah. And in that sponsorship section, he also had a sponsorship for Swan Bitcoin, which is the company that Corey owns, but doesn't have like any additional disclaimers being like, oh, the guy I'm talking to on the show right now also sponsors the show. Like that never came up. I'm not a fan.
Yeah, the intricate, and I mean, I think what I would probably lean on is more transparency would be better. Again, like even going all the way back to AHM.
Yes, correct.
If you're making it really transparent to me about how it is that you're operating your business and a few other things. Now there are limitations, and so I get that. Yeah. But let's say with FTX, if Sam had come out maybe a year ago and been like, "Hey, we do have FTT." And here's transparent. We actually do cross-collateralize, and we try to do these loans so that we can earn you more money. That's the risk. You might get more money from it.
Yes.
But in the knowledge of that, you can be like, okay, if this goes tits up, we're fucked, right? Yep. Now, there's talk of, if CZ, so owner of Binance, right, CEO of Binance, he saw that and was like, okay, I found out about this. This looks like shit. It's going to go down. Sam actually posted, so this is Sam Bankman-Fried, if you guys want to check this out, for those who don't know, but Sam actually posted something similar on Twitter or somewhere else. I think it was on Twitter. We was basically saying that,
well played.
Well played. You won. I have no doubt this is happening in most exchanges that are using partnered coins in some kind, right? So Binance has BNB. How cross-collateralized that is to other loans, who knows, right? But again, I've made a decision a long time ago, being like, I don't want to trust that. If I'm going to operate in an exchange, it's going to be one that's like a pure exchange or a decentralized exchange. That's it. More transparency is obviously always, I think, a better thing. And the advertising model, at least for me, goes, there's a lot of seediness that abounds in that. I don't know if you've looked into, obviously, this is all coming out now, so that's why I'm looking into it, but the Sam Bankman, I'm going to call him SBF, details into how much money he was passing through to the
Alameda
candidates. No, to the candidates for the political races and stuff like that.
I heard the figure 72 million, right, like that.
And more, or more than that. So like all this money going into political stuff, and you kind of start wondering, okay, what's the real agenda here? What was the real conversation that was happening here? Obviously, we're two mere mortals. We can't comment on it because we don't know shit in comparison. But for me, I go, it's lacking transparency. It lacks transparency in a lot of ways. And I go, the more we can get to that, the better. I don't think the advertising model has that for us. So.
Yes, yep. Good summary there. Good summary one.
What are the items you want to rate on this particular podcast, good sir? Well, I will rate this. I actually will rate this, and we can probably end on this one. I just wrote, not your keys, not your coins. And
that's the biggest thing to take out of the whole FTX.
Risk and incoming regulation, proof of funds, etc. So I just wanted to comment on this one because something that Jeff mentioned a couple of months ago now. Jeff Yu on the podcast, CEO of Monochrome and ex-CEO of Binance Australia. And he was like, I asked him directly, what's the biggest thing that's coming? What's the thing that in 5 years' time we're not talking about right now that's going to be around. Regulation, right? Regulation. And what's come out of a lot of things is Celsius, FTX. You better believe, I think there's a conversation with the G20 or whatever it is in 15th of November. There might possibly be things that come out in terms of regulation of the crypto industry in good ways or bad ways. And I kind of go, regardless of all of this, a statement that sometimes you listen to and you probably avoid sometimes, or you just don't take any action. I know we have good friends who don't take this action. But if it's not your keys, it is not your coins. Again, this is a comparable that, take it from like a bank. If you were to go to your bank right now and be like, I want to withdraw all my money, you can't do that. You're not going to do that. You won't. That's full stop. Because it's not you don't have that ownership of the actual physical / digital asset that is available to you. So just be very wary and be aware of the risks. So, we talked about this previously in a conversation with Peter, but for myself, I have some coinage on exchanges. Like, do I think that that's a risky thing? Yeah, there's a level of risk there. Do I have everything I own on exchanges? Hell no. Holy shit, that would be astoundingly stupid. So, do I have things in hot wallets? Yes. Do I have any cold wallets right now? No. I don't have any cold wallets. There's no cold wallets that are abound. I've moved. I had a thing of like.
Juan's address, by the way, is.
Well, you can have my address. There's nothing you can really do about it. Like anybody can find anybody's address. That's an easy thing. In fact, if you have an NFT or a CNFT,
no, I'm talking about a home address.
Oh yeah. No, if you have it, well, again, can you do anything with that? I'm not sure. But it comes down to, even with a hot wallet, like it's not as safe because it's connected to the internet. Fine, but I have my own keys. And like without those keys, there's very little things few people can do. And so the safety comes around with just be aware of the risk that if you're having coins, or this doesn't even apply to crypto. If you have anything that's out of your hands from a management ownership perspective, you're gonna have either a high level of trust to make up for the lack of verification you can make. Right, so I'll call out on the podcast. I have a property, right? Now I have someone who manages that property, and there is a high level of trust that I have to put with them to manage that property. I can't verify that. There's no way for me to verify some of the things that get said. I get an email saying this person's doing this person's not doing this, you're not getting this payment. There is zero way for me to verify that. There is just pure trust in that effect. So there's instances where you cannot verify, but where you can absolutely verify, and the only way from a cryptocurrency perspective or Bitcoin perspective that you can verify you have your coins is to have your own keys. So for me, I was like, all this happening went, yep, okay, that's now, I don't think it's ever been as clear to me as it is now around that side. I don't know if has it shifted anything in your mentality? I know we talked about it with Peter about the last month. I've purely been just like Bitcoin, basically.
Every failure that comes makes me think, okay, I'm following the right things. Because all of these thoughts have flashed through my head a year and a half ago. Oh, maybe I can get a bit of extra yield if I use Celsius and BlockFi. Those were the two that people recommended. Oh, maybe I should diversify and try using other exchanges. I tried to sign up for FTX once, I believe, and I just didn't make it past the KYC. I was just like, no, fuck this.
Okay. I've
already KYC'd elsewhere. Like, I don't want to do this again. Maybe it has like better trading features, which I do not care about. So what's the point? Because I'm just doing what I normally do, which is I'll buy it and then I immediately get it off the exchange because I don't want anything sitting there. So no, if honestly, as much as the pain hurts the industry and whatnot, I'm kind of like good. Like this shit needs to get people need to get wrecked.
There was a message to learn. There was a message I replied on Twitter, and I was like, someone, I think the post was something around that. This is once again the reason why Bitcoin or off exchanges is so important, and I think my initial reaction was like, I was gonna like that. I don't think so, but I went, actually, yeah, I totally agree. I think more and more of these sort of failures go, okay, damn, I realize why, you're talking a decentralized space that has got centralization, and you go, okay, right, I get that. That's obvious. There's an obviously here of why that's not going to work. And it does. It makes me question and go, okay, well, what are some of the other centralized spaces? And one funny post I thought was like, we won't see the bottom until Ethereum hits $0 sort of thing. So it's like, what's the true bottom? And it's like, is that the reality? Is it the case that perhaps we cannot exist with any what they call shitcoins beyond Bitcoin in terms of what it means? Now I don't affirm to that. I don't think that's true. I think we can have multiple coins, and I genuinely think the future is multiple coins. But it has to be multiple coins with full ability to verify, and none of this bullshit going on with centralization of cross-collateralizing other things. That, I think, is what's going to hurt the industry at large, because what exists in the fiat system, and that's the same thing that happens, right? That's in the same thing in the system where, you give your bank whatever money, they are using that to leverage it to do other investments. Don't be retarded. That's what they do. There's not the reason you can't go to your bank and get $1 million out is because they don't have it. It's because they've got it in play, acting to be utilized somewhere else. That's how they're doing it, right? That's bottom dollar how it is. How do you get interest rates to be at a certain level to be able to give you money back? Because they're making money off it, right? So that's an existing system that already does that, but it is backed by, as you say, companies, governments, other entities that allow it to continue to support it. So the problem with an unregulated system like in crypto with FTX and a few others is that when they go bottoms up, there's no savior, there's no nothing, and so they go to shit. And so the whole market goes to shit. But it just supports for me the idea that whether it happens or not in the fiat system, whatever, okay, but it gives me more encouragement of like, okay, I see now why the basis of not your keys, not your coins is just so important.
Yeah. Well, to tie this all up into a neat little bow, we've both had multiple decisions to make over these past 2 years of researching all this stuff and diving into it, of what am I actually going to do with it? Do I want to earn any yield? And there's been multiple, much like in AHM or in FTX, people making individual decisions of how do I feel about this risk thing? Is this a good thing? Should I, try and be listen to this little bit of greed of getting that extra bit of yield? And both of us have had multiple touch points of where we could have invested in this thing or put our money, our crypto in this place and got wrecked. But we didn't, because we, made those maybe harder decisions. Maybe we weren't lazy. Maybe we were like, oh, we need to investigate this more. Maybe we were like, I'm noticing I'm getting a bit greedy. This is a bad thing to do. And so how do you think about that? Look, just some actionable advice for people at home.
Yep.
The phrase not your keys, not your crypto, or not your keys, not your coins comes from Andreas Antonopoulos. If you want to learn about good practices in terms of safety, in terms of trust, listen to his stuff from 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, even up to the present day, although he's stopped posting in the last 5 months from what I can tell. That's an amazing source of info as to how you not saying how you should, but how I at least think of things. Eric Voorhees, as I mentioned, the reason why I watch Bankless, because he goes on there every now and then. Yep. His thought processes and what he kind of suggests and recommends and how he behaves, that's how I try and emulate. That's what I want to do as well, because it makes sense to me, and he hasn't got wrecked. So yeah. Follow the button. All right, neat little bow there. Boop.
Good. All right, we're going to leave it there, folks. Again, and we talked quite a bit about crypto and a few other things here, but if you want to support the podcast, we do recommend that you support us through the sharing of Satoshis via the way of the Valley for Valley. So,
yes,
podcasting 2.0, which we operate in heavily, it allows you, folks out there, mere mortal lights, to support us by setting a boostergram or streaming through some Satoshis to us, and that is, I guess, the value that you can provide to us. There's other ways you can provide value. You can share this with a friend or a family member. You think, okay, they're talking a bit of truth, perhaps I want to share with them. That's also valuable. If you think there's ways that we can make the podcast better, if you go, man, you guys got a really dark background on that video, if you actually turn this setting on, it makes it better. Cool. That's also nice. It's also good to know. But overall, what we're providing here is hopefully some value to you, mere mortal lights out there, and we in turn just request some of that value back to us to allow us to operate the podcast and continue doing what we do day to day.
Hashtag fuck advertising.
Yeah, exactly. That's it, folks. We're going to leave it there. Me Immortal Lights, Juan out.
Watch yourself, people. Current out.
Ooh,
Hi-hi.
KYC.